Namaskar and welcome to Indian Diplomacy, show on India's national television channel Doordarshan about Indian foreign policy, India's international relations and important strategic partnerships of India around the world that are critical for its rise. Viewers, this is a special episode from the green and beautiful campus of O.P. Jindal Global University in Sonipat, Haryana, where we are going to be talking about India's pivotal comprehensive strategic partnership with a key country in the Indo-Pacific, Australia. Australia-India friendship is at an all-time high and the relations are really blooming in a variety of domains and sectors. Why is this so and what is the future of this outstanding friendship? This is the theme of the special show, and to discuss this I have with me a very special group of participants from Monash University in Australia. There are 16 students and 2 professors from this great university in Melbourne, and they are here in India for India familiarization visit and to learn about the country and to also engage with Indian intellectuals and students. So welcome folks, welcome to Indian Diplomacy and to national television. So you are all visiting from Australia and you've been here for a while and have been seeing this country and learning about India in all its dimensions. So let me start with the big picture of the friendship. Why do you think this friendship has reached such a peak today? You know, even if you were talking about maybe Australia-India relations 10 years ago, we wouldn't have much to say. But today, look at the dimensions. There's the, the traditional 3 C's as they're called, right? Cricket, curry and Commonwealth. Those were supposed to be the binding factors. But then there was another formulation of the 3 E's, energy, economy and education. And beyond that, now we have defense, military, geopolitics, Indo-Pacific, balancing, all kinds of, things are on the menu now. And the sky is the limit really for this partnership. So I'd request one of you to please come in to reflect on why you think this partnership is going so strong. And why now in this juncture of history? I mean, why not in earlier times? Why did we miss each other in the past? And why have we finally discovered and are bonding so well now? Would anyone want to come in, please?
My name is Senemi. I'm studying law and politics, philosophy and economics at Monash. I think that the relationship has grown over time, and I do think that at this point in time, with the global world being so dynamic and changing, I think it's more important than ever for the relationship to thrive and become closer. And I also think that because we're both such big powers in the Indo-Pacific, that's another reason that we've come to have such a close relationship. And recently being here and interacting with the students, I think we've all found that we have a lot of shared values and a shared respect for each other. That's also led to us being having a closer relationship.
Yeah, would someone else? Yes, Professor.
So I'm Stephanie Collins, Director of the Politics, Philosophy and Economics degree at Monash. And I would say one thing that we've really learned through our Monash PPE time here at JGU is about India's new strategy of multipolarity and multi-alignment as a way of trying to achieve multipolarity. It's a real shift in kind of India's foreign policy to the kind of dynamic alliances that India is building with all kinds of nations around the world. I think Australia has really benefited from India's shift towards multi-alignment, and that's something that we've learned in particular from our international relations lecturers here at JGU.
Viewers, the first respondents are saying that this is a strategic partnership because of the Indo-Pacific, the shared values, and also because of a shift in the foreign policy of India towards multi-alignment and towards building a whole range of close friendships that will matter. And I can also add that we in India see that the Australian side has also had a rethink about the region, Australia's role in the region, Australian foreign policy, the strategic orientation, and which is why I think India also matters more. Would any of you want to come in, folks, on Australian foreign policy and what has been changing there and why India has become more important in your calculus, in your country's calculus, and why they are seeing India as a big opportunity from the Australian national interest point of view? Yes, please.
Hey, I'm Tom. I'm studying economics And in regards to Australia's changing foreign policy, I think that Australia saw itself as part of Europe or part of the Western world for a long time. And in recent decades, as we just have had more diaspora and just more trade with Asia in general, we've come to see ourselves as more of an Asian power. And as part of that consideration, we have to work with India and other countries a lot more.
The Asian dimension, let's talk a little bit about it. So you have China, which has always been a major economic partner for you. But now you're looking increasingly towards diversifying and looking at other potential alternatives, right? So, and you have Japan, of course, which has historically been a kind of a quasi-ally because both of you are US allies. So how does India come in there in your calculus? And I've read the white papers that have been published by the Australian government talking about India in very glowing terms. So it will be useful for our audiences to know more about what you think is the place of India within the broader Asian calculus. Australia has become, has reoriented its identity as an Asian country, but then where does India stand within the Asian lineup?
Well, just to talk about it from an economic perspective, because that's the angle that I know most about, the thing that India has which can't be matched almost anywhere else is just incredible growth and incredible economic opportunity. So if we as Australians are looking to diversify our supply chains, to find new trading partners, then we have to look to India. There's just nowhere else we can go.
Thank you, thank you. So viewers, there's nowhere else to go for Australia except India for growth and for opportunities, say our friends from Monash University. And indeed, the market size, the open democratic values, all these things matter. Let me go a little deeper on the democratic values aspect as well, because it's not just all business. Friends, it's often said that, countries that share a similar type of political values, you're all students of politics, so I'm going to expect you to respond especially to this one. The fact that we are thriving and robust democracies is supposed to create a high level of trust, especially at the government to government level, even the business to business and people to people. All three levels, you find that there's greater affinity. And if you go back in time to your own alliance systems and your own relationships also, the fact that the US has been a treaty ally of Australia for so many decades and is your strongest or your number one partner in the world is obviously because of this shared sense of values, right, and political culture. So on this aspect, you've also been learning about Indian politics and you follow what's happening in this country. There are obviously similarities and differences. And we, of course, also know about your electoral system and all that. Would someone want to come in on this aspect of how important you think this is? I mean, sometimes people say, oh no, this is just window dressing, and the real thing is always, the trade and the investment and the, the military and the defense cooperation, and it's all realpolitik. But then what explains this affinity? I mean, it does look like democracy is something that brings our two countries together, isn't it? It's much more than just the deals that we strike. Yes, please.
My name's Lewis. I study politics at Monash University. I think it was our former Prime Minister Paul Keating who once said that Australia needs to find security in Asia, not from Asia. And I think that started a signal that transitioned our foreign policy in that direction. I think after the Second World War, we very much switched from the UK as a primary partner to the US, and following the fall of the Berlin Wall and the fall of the Soviet Union, we definitely followed the United States as the sole power in the world. And as we enter a new multipolar world, as you mentioned, India is already multi-alignment as a policy, and I think Australia should stay dynamic in who we follow as a partner. And there's no one better than the biggest democracy in the world, I should say. And when we look to find our security in Asia, we have to look to the powers that are already here. And India as the biggest democracy, Australia is a democracy, and I think it's important that we, as well as Japan, that obviously that alliance exists with the Quad as a very important strategic alliance in this region. So I think following the trail of democracy is a great starting point for us in terms of defining who we see as partners, but also, as we've mentioned previously, the economic and the other ties that follow us in this region. So we obviously have a relationship with China on an economic frame, but I think democracy enables us to have a much stronger and deeper connection with a country like India.
Thank you. And why would it matter? I mean, why should we care for this? Because I assume that there's a discourse in Australia about the region and the regional order, and why we should protect it and ensure that it doesn't become, dominated by any single country, especially an authoritarian country. Because if an authoritarian country takes over the region, then it will rewrite the rules and the institutions and the way we function, right? And I think we are less comfortable with that, isn't that? I mean, that's one reason why democracy is not just because we admire each other, we have, people's will being represented in who rule us, right? It's also about the regional order, and we would like democracies to take the lead in this region, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. And Australia, we firmly believe and support democracy. It's why we've followed the United States in supporting Ukraine as a democracy in the region, and to fighting, I suppose, the spread of authoritarianism in the world. And we firmly believe that democracy is something that we should protect, and it's something that we strive to, and something with orderly elections and accepting election results that we see in Australia as a primary value. And we absolutely are open to supporting allies who also support democracy, and hopefully we can work together to further spread democracy in the world. That's our primary political value.
Right. So, viewers, democracy matters, and that's one of the pillars of the Australia-India Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. We also work together in our shared region of the Indo-Pacific on many challenges, and especially on governance issues, and how to improve the accountability of citizens, of rulers to citizens. These sort of issues are emerging fields where India and Australia could jointly do many things to shore up the region and the practices and the political culture in the region. Okay, so far we have spoken about many dimensions of Australia-India friendship, but let me come to the people-to-people connect. And we have now nearing 1 million Indian Australians who are permanent residents in Australia, and this diaspora has become a big living bridge, as we call it, between our two societies. There's a lot of exchange, cultural, as well as they are very successful economically in your country, and they are major contributors to the growth and the social fabric of Australia now, right? So their integration, our diaspora, their presence there, what they have done to your country, and how well have they become the ambassadors of the chain link between our two countries. Would someone want to come in? I know some of you are from the diaspora, from the Indian Australian community. I'd like to hear what the diaspora is doing there, and why this factor needs to be highlighted when we talk about the friendship between our two countries. Would anyone? Yes, please.
I'm Roshni. I study law and PPE at Monash. I can say that the reason why Indian Australians thrive in Australia particularly is because Australia is a very diverse and multicultural society, and is very accepting of people from all walks of life. So for Indians who aspire for something different or want new experiences, they can certainly find a home in Australia. And Australia, because it's a multicultural country, you can cling on to aspects of your own cultural identity whilst also integrating into the wider and the broader Australian culture. And that's why I think Indian Australians do so well over there.
Yeah, I was reading one of your MPs from Parramatta, Andrew Charlton's book, Australia's Pivot to India, and he pays a lot of tribute to the Indian Australian community. I think they're a big number in his constituency. And he was talking about how they are so entrepreneurial and have made it big in Australia. And of course, the milieu matters, the multiculturalism, the acceptance of outsiders, for which Australia is famous, that also matters. So I think that is critical. Are you familiar with the business side of what the diaspora is doing there, and the economic linkages they may be able to? Would anyone else want to come in on this? What the Indian diaspora in Australia is doing, and how they can really rev up. Already our trade and economic and investment ties are booming with the signing of a free trade agreement and all that, but the diaspora is always critical in these kind of situations to be able to move capital, goods and services and people on all sides, right? Would anyone want to come in on that? The diaspora and the economic? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Cade and I'm studying PPE at Monash. I think from a friendship basis, many of my friends, their families have engaged in business within Australia and have been able to facilitate trade from India into Australia. For example, one of my friends owns an Indian food shop within Melbourne and they sell many Indian goods that they've imported across into Australia, and other friends, their parents work in business and they've been able to facilitate partnerships with Indian companies in Australia. So I think it's really important for Australia's economic landscape to have the Indian diaspora in Australia to facilitate greater trade and friendships within the community.
Thank you. And let me also ask you about the cultural aspect, because in your campus, for example, I'm sure there are like hundreds, if not thousands, of Indian students, and Australia's become a big destination for Indian students. Of course, they're not the diaspora in the sense they've just arrived and they're only studying there, but they also add to the mix, isn't it? The diversity on your campus, and you must be having lots of friends of Indian origin or fresh off the boat Indians who've just come to study there, right? So what kind of flavor do they bring, and how does that change Australia as a country? Any thoughts?
Yeah, so from a friendship level, I think many of my friends have taken me to Sikh temples to experience the culture and the religion and the food there, as well as many Indian Australians have contributed to the political landscape within Monash's university groups, and I think that's been really impactful by bringing Indian cultural elements into Australia's young leadership landscape.
And the soft power, I mean, we assume that our movies and music and dance are also influencing, and you're all grooving to our beats, I hope. So anyone would like to add about our cultural impact on your country and what's happening there? Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Nidhi. I'm studying PP and International Relations at Monash. Originally, I'm from Mauritius, so I think the increase of the Indian diaspora in Australia has really helped my university experience personally. So there's a lot of cultural events that we go to. I think some of my favourite times at university have been at cultural balls, dressing up in langas and earrings and jewellery. And I have many Indian friends and I love listening to Bollywood music. So I think that's really improved my university experience. And yeah, it's just really fun to be part of Indian culture.
Wow. So a student from Mauritius, but who's of Indian origin and who's now in Australia, and who loves the lehengas and the Bollywood Bhangra dance and all that. It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, it's just the universal appeal that these cultural, forms have, and quite incredible. And the diaspora has been a critical bridge to that. Anything else you'd like to add about the diaspora and what you see happening in Australia with people of Indian origin?
I definitely think that there's an increase in multiculturalism and acceptance. And I think growing up in Australia, there definitely has been a change in acceptance. And there's definitely more respect between shared values. Also, I guess the soft power has really increased with the music and the outfits. Has really, the people-to-people connections, I think. Even the increase in international students, and I think I've found that in my classes, especially learning politics and even on this campus, that we have a lot of shared values and a lot of the young people have the similar thoughts as we do. And I think that gives us a lot of hope for the future and how we want to reform both of our countries.
Right. Viewers, the cultural bonds between the two countries are quite significant, are growing, and the diaspora is one of the bridges. But also these kinds of visits, when groups of Australian students, for example, travel through India, come here and experience the country and see for themselves what's happening, that also makes a difference. And this group from Monash University has also been traveling here in the northern part of India to different locations. So let me bring them in a little bit about their experiences here, what all they have seen here, and how that has influenced their thinking about India. I mean, you folks have been traveling and seen some very important historical and religious places. You've been to Rishikesh, I believe, and you've seen the majestic the the Ganges flowing along the mountains and all that. So would someone want to come in and talk about what all you've seen here and what that's triggering in you, in your thinking? You may have had some preconceived notions about India from what you've read or maybe what you've watched. But after coming here and seeing it for yourself and experiencing it, how has that affected you? And tell us a little bit about your India experiences. Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Julia. I'm studying PPE and law at Monash. Something that I've noticed about India is particularly how diverse it is. Obviously, here at OP Jindal, it's very different to when we were driving on the bus through the streets of Delhi. And you can really see the disparity between the people. Like, you know, obviously here at this university, it's quite opulent and very beautiful and built up, whereas when we traveled to a local village in Sonipat, we saw, you know, more sort of lower socioeconomic communities and, you know, their livelihoods, and it's really interesting to see the difference. And then also I'd like to add, when we visited Rishikesh, I think that was also a very diverse place because it really embodied the spiritual aspect of Indian culture, obviously with its connection to the Ganges and its tradition of meditation and yoga. I think it was really a really peaceful and beautiful experience. And it's interesting, I think, to compare the different places and to really gain a well-rounded sense of how diverse India really is.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so the diversity and the breadth of India, I mean, few weeks here, you won't even be able to get an iota of this, you know, vast country. So you should keep coming back and, you know, becoming Indophiles. A lot of people come to India and then fall in love with this country and keep coming back and become scholars and experts and, you know, analysts of this country. So that will be of great value. It will advance the friendship at the intellectual level also. But talking of what you're seeing, the diversity and the breadth, what else are you seeing? Will someone else want to come in on your India travels and sightseeing and learnings so far? Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Carly and I study PPE and law. And this is sort of a similarity. So I sort of didn't have many preconceptions about India before I came. And I was surprised to see that potentially modern Australia and India are quite culturally different. However, I think that our Indigenous culture in Australia, which is super important to recognise, has a lot of ties to Indian culture and philosophy. So the other day we spoke about and we saw a visual representation of moksha. And I thought that sort of idea of storytelling through art was, very similar to our Indigenous Australians and how they share their history. So I think, in terms of our populations, there are some really important connections that can be made there to our Indigenous population, which I think may be overlooked because I think modern Australia and India are more I guess, close, or that's where the connection sort of formed in modern Australia. But those Indigenous relations are also really important and very similar.
Wow. So there could be connections drawn across centuries or even millennia to see how a traditional society which is modernizing will have elements of the old which may echo with your Aboriginal people. So very interesting. Anyone else wants to come in on the India experience? Yes, please.
Hello, I'm Eva. I study PPE and law as well at Monash University. I think something that's really stood out to me coming to India has been just the community mindedness and the welcomeness, the way that so many of the Jindal students have been so welcoming, alongside the communities that we've visited, I think has been a really fascinating thing, because I think typically Australia, I think we've all observed, can be quite individualistic in the way that we think, whereas India places, from what I understand, a large value on family and community, and I think that by enabling us to engage with that sort of mindset more, alongside the ties that it has with Indian philosophy, and recognizing yourself as a part of sort of a bigger a bigger society, and the way that the world works, I think, is a really interesting perspective for a lot of us Australians to learn. and just to sort of move away from the self-interested sort of mindset that I think that a lot of Australians tend to have.
Right. This is interesting too, viewers. Our friends, young friends from Monash University in Australia, talking about individualism and community-based, group social life, and how there could be something that they find here in India which could be useful for the social, makeup back home in Australia, and of course vice versa, because we also need, individual brilliance and merit to come out and to shine, and that's how you have economic growth and opportunity and become a high-income society. So maybe a balance of the two, individualism and communitarianism, will be ideal, and that's something that's fascinating. Any more thoughts on what you've seen in India, what you've experienced? Yes, sir, please.
Hi, my name's Julian. I study law as well as politics, philosophy and economics. And as you said, I did have some preconceptions about India, and that's because some of my best friends in Australia are Indian, and they have shown me the best side of humanity. I think Indians are some of the most welcoming and caring and polite and friendly people on the planet, truly. One of my best friends, Arth, is meeting him in Delhi soon, actually. But we talk about Australia and India relations through the 3 C's, the 3 E's, even the 3 D's of democracy, diaspora, and docility, friendship, of course.
Prime Minister Modi talked about it in one of his speeches, the 3 Ds.
It's widespread, but I think we're more than just acquaintances of democracy or business partners. We're really family in a lot of ways, and I think as family we can understand each other even spiritually. When we went to Rishikesh, I took the opportunity to dip in the Ganges. It was such a fulfilling experience. I got out of it. I felt, of course, did 3 dips.
You are now one of us, officially.
Well, you felt it. Yeah.
You passed the rite of passage.
I felt the Ganges on my skin. It felt pure. I felt amazing for the rest of the day. I went and did yoga, of course. But, the Ganges flows through India like a stream of lifeblood through the country. It's really that flowing blood through India. I think it's interesting to compare it to Australia in some of our ancient landmarks of the country, like Uluru. I went to Uluru in February, which is a large stone monolith in the center of Australia, and we call it the Red Heart. And I think it's uniting in that same way that you have the lifeblood of the Ganges, we have the heart of Australia, the Red Heart of Australia. So I feel you can draw the spiritual parallels between the two countries in those ways too. Yeah.
Super. Viewers, young people from Australia are drawing spiritual parallels between the two countries. That's why, especially to viewers from around the world who are watching this show, seeing is believing, experiencing is believing, coming here is believing. So it's very important for you to take the time out, either in a group or as a backpacker individually or through any other mode. Come to India and see it for yourself, and maybe that will help you to rise above some of the screaming media headlines also, because it's such a big country that it's very difficult, it's reductionist to just label it as one thing or the other until you see all this country in all its glory and all its contradictions. Okay, folks, so far we've spoken about your India experiences, what all you've seen, the Australia-India friendship. We haven't spoken about the military and the defense cooperation, and that is also very significant, and if some of you are studying that and are learning about it, I know you've heard from one of our very distinguished professors and former ambassador Mohan Kumar about Indian foreign policy and the strategic cooperation. That's also an arena, because we are not only here for cultural or economic reasons, but there's also a geopolitical connection that brings us closer. And as students of politics, you don't have to be convinced about that aspect. So that also, would someone want to come in and talk about the defense relationship? And our navies are doing extraordinary things. We've got a 2+2 dialogue between the foreign ministers and defense ministers, and increasingly the interoperability between our militaries is growing. We are part of the Quad grouping that also has Japan and Australia and the United States. So let's talk a little bit about the defense side of it as well, and what you see is the future going forward with this aspect of the cooperation. Yes, please.
My name's Chris. I'm a student of commerce and also politics, philosophy and economics at Monash. I think with Australians and India's defence relationship, it really does come down to our shared border on the Indian Ocean. In Australia, in our national anthem, we say that we're girt by sea, and our trade by sea is really important to us. And in the Indian Ocean, is a very strategic area for Australia. Our submarine fleet is based in Perth in the Indian Ocean, along with a lot of our naval communications and aircraft bases. And I think India and Australia have a really strong ability to try and keep trade free and democratic values flowing in the Indian Ocean. As far as the future goes, I think we're going to see a lot more exercises done together, exchanges of officers and ministerial talks, and a lot of a closer partnership in that ways. As we enter an uncertain world, I think it's really important for us democracies with our shared values to come together and make sure to have a brighter future.
Yeah, and let me take you up a little bit deeper into this question also. You know, while you have the US security alliance that's always been there, there have been moments in the especially last 10 years or so, where it does look like Australia is not sure about the full credibility of the US commitments, and it looks like they're also looking to diversify and especially look to India and others as a kind of like a backup or a kind of like an insurance policy, because you've seen isolationist currents in the US, and you've seen also some degree of wavering by American leaders in this region as to how firmly they will come to any allies rescue if they are attacked. So that lingering doubt perhaps is also enabling this this defense relationship to go forward. And of course the US wants it also to happen, right? It's not like India is a substitute to the US, but they would also like this region, the main regional players, the regional powers, the rising powers and the middle powers to mingle among themselves and improve their own internal coordination, isn't it, to face the security challenges?
Yeah, certainly. I think that there has been definitely a wavering of US and a growing isolationism in the United States. As far as the Australian context goes, they do have a very strong presence here. So there are a few thousand Marines in Darwin. There's also generally a rotation of US bombers in Catherine. As far as India and Australia goes, I think that our growing defence industries are a really great way of partnering with each other in the future, perhaps. And I don't really think that Australia should see India as a backup. I think Australia should see India and each other as a primary partner and someone that we should really look to as a great friend. And as Julian said earlier, it's one of our family who we really want to bring in to face whatever threats may come to the future.
Right, thank you. Viewers, India need not be a backup for Australia. It can be a primary partner, says our friend from Monash University. And that's a significant way of looking at things. India's importance in the Australian strategic calculus continues to grow, and we are seeing more of that in the Indian Ocean region. And for India to have a footprint and a presence in the Pacific east of Malacca, we will rely significantly on Australian assets and Australian naval positioning and aircraft and so on, and of course also with the US Indo-Pacific Command. So for us to become a net security provider beyond the Indian Ocean, we will need these stepping stones, and Australia is one of them. Any other views on the military cooperation and the defense partnership, and in the broader context of Quad also? I know now we have this new alliance, the AUKUS, Australia, UK, US. India is not a part of it, but we are essentially in support of any such formation in the region. We want this multipolar order to really, non-hegemonic order to emerge in the region. So any other views on the military partnership and the defense cooperation and the geopolitical aspect? Because ultimately we are seen to be together in some balancing. We are counterbalancing, and we are doing it in a subtle way, not in an overly militaristic way. And we are also coordinating in some of the regional countries, isn't it? Like from Sri Lanka right here, next door to India, all the way up to Pacific Island nations, there is increased India-Australia coordination that's happening. And we are also going to look for jointly doing projects in third countries and such things. So this is really strategic cooperation at its best. Any other thoughts on the region? We have a sense that Australia is a bit on the defensive in the Pacific Islands, where it fears losing its historic sphere of influence to China, and likewise we in our neighborhood in the Indian Ocean fear likewise that there is an encroachment happening in areas where historically India has been like the leading power. So there's also much that we share in common, isn't it, at that level, as wanting to defend our turfs and to maintain our historical influence also in the smaller countries. Anyone would like to come in who hasn't spoken? Yes, please.
Hello, I'm Tim. I do law and PP at Monash. So I think India and Australia are alike in the sense that we're looking to exert our influence in the region to combat any instability and maintain peace and stability.
Yeah, let me also take you a little forward on this question, because we've all followed what happened in the Solomon Islands. And that example has been like a cautionary tale. India is now engaging with all the Pacific Island countries as a group. We have something called FIPIC, F-I-P-I-C. It's our summit level meeting where our Prime Minister engages with the presidents and leaders of all the smaller Pacific Island countries. And our officials are on record that we are closely consulted with the Australians on this matter, because they have the area knowledge and the understanding of what's happening there much better. So, so for us to do something jointly also, our view is to consult with the Australians, and likewise we would want the Australians to coordinate with us when they do something in the Maldives or in a Sri Lanka or in a Bangladesh or a Myanmar, right? So that kind of thing, suggests a deeper level of strategic cooperation. So Australian pushback and or reclaiming of their, of where they are slipping. Is there something that you would like us to know in India, and maybe we could compare notes and see if there are similar strategies that we could adopt, given that we are also facing this what we call expansionism or encroachment?
Yeah, well, from Australia's perspective and from what I understand about the Pacific Islands in particular, the one thing the Pacific Islands are concerned about the most is climate change. So in terms of promoting India and Australia's interest in the region, we need to cooperate collaboratively and understand what the Pacific Islands want from us. So in terms of not just giving them money for infrastructure and combating other strong countries in the region, we need to bring something to the table for them, because sea levels are on the rise and these countries are at the forefront of the climate change battle. And India and Australia, as big economic powers for the 21st century, are going to be critical in combating that issue for them. And I think that would be my advice, from my understanding, to India and Australia, of course, because we can both do more on this key issue.
Yeah, viewers, a very important point. Thank you, my friend. We need to do a lot more in terms of the civilian sector. It's not only military cooperation, infrastructure, disaster resilient infrastructure. We are part of the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, and we are also trying to provide public goods in the region jointly. Under Quad, there was a huge vaccine initiative during the COVID-19 pandemic, but also infrastructure building and skilling of people in healthcare and these sort of things are areas where there are real needs in across Oceania and the Pacific and Indo-Pacific, and that's where I think we can come in. Professor Wellings, would you like to also add something about where you see Australia, India within this broader regional architecture? We say it's a regional architecture, and that's something that we all have to build together.
Certainly, thank you. My name's Ben Wellings, and I'm involved in the Monash Politics, Philosophy and Economics degree. So I just want to underscore what Tim said about the importance of climate change. We've talked about the 3 E's, and we haven't concentrated so much on energy. But if we're thinking about how that kind of cooperation plays out, and if we are shifting some of our energy from going to China to going to India, then we've got to be mindful of what kind of impacts that's going to be having within our very broad region. And part of the thing about the architecture, the security architecture of the region that you've rightly highlighted, is a conceptual shift in amongst the Australian government from being part of the Asia-Pacific to being part of the Indo-Pacific. And this, of course, links Australia with India, a shared ocean that is our common border. But of course, it also introduces an element of potential overreach. So analysts in Canberra, Australia's capital, will be clear-eyed about the risks as well as the benefits associated with that. Now, in strategic terms, Australia is married to America, right? So we're just, and that's in a treaty level obligation. And although there's some disquiet about the isolationist tone that has come from Washington and will come from Washington, there is, of course, the quadrilateral dialogue that you've mentioned. Now, that is just a dialogue, of course, but it is a start. Of course, from India's point of view, India is interested in the balancing that you talked about, which is going to be focused on the northern border, particularly with China. But the risk for India, I think, is that the weight of that architecture is tilted slightly towards the Western Pacific, particularly with Japan and the United States. And so we have fantastic cooperation. You've mentioned the Indian Navy has made several visits to Australian ports, and I think we've seen the aircraft carrier, the Vikrant, arrive in Australia. So the cooperation is growing, and in some senses it's really a response to the strategic competition with China. So each of those 4 countries, of course, for quite different reasons, has a common interest in not stating this openly in forums of diplomacy, of course, but managing China as a regional power that's experienced an enormous amount of growth in the last 20 years, but now there are questions about that trajectory. So there are other forums. Of course, G20 is probably another important forum for economic cooperation, and that's where the importance of the Australia-India bilateral relationship, exemplified by the free trade agreement, stands on its own, but there are other forums for dialogue that India and Australia can pursue very, very constructive forms of conversation in thinking about the future of the Indo-Pacific.
Thank you. Viewers, Professor Ben Wellings from Monash University is talking about the complexity of the regional architecture and where Australia and India stand vis-a-vis each other and also vis-a-vis other players, and how we can build coalitions, broader coalitions around issues. So climate change has been mentioned as one of the issues on which, because there are a lot of island nations out there that are facing rising sea levels and serious threats to their very existence. And if we, Australia and India in particular, as well as our other partners, Quad Plus, some of the ASEAN countries, if we can all come together and do joint work to mitigate some of these risks, it will be highly valued and respected in the region. And obviously there is also we have been warned about the risks of overstretch and overdoing this also. So it's got to be subtler, and because the smaller countries don't want to be sucked into any kind of a new Cold War in the region, and they would prefer to have benefits from all sides. So we should at least be there on the table as an alternative, not so much to displace the Chinese, but to say, okay, there's not only one game in town. So that matters. Okay, folks, we are reaching the last part of the show. So I want those who haven't spoken to come in and reflect on the overall India experience, the India, what all you have seen here, and what you will take back, and what is the India story you're going to tell people when you go back down under. And obviously people know India because of the cricket, especially, it's so popular on both sides. We are playing a test series right now, It's very hotly contested, but still, the rivalry is only on the pitch, not off it. So this India tour, how will it make you a better student, a scholar, or a thinker, or a researcher? And how are you going to use what you have learned here and what you've heard here in your writing and as you build your careers? I'd like to know how this has been maybe a transformative experience. We like to believe that whoever comes to India is a life-changing experience for them. So has it been? And I'd like to know what you think this is going to do for your scholastic abilities as young Australian thinkers and intellectuals. Please.
Hello, my name's Anna and I study PPE and Commerce at Monash. And one thing I've really loved learning about in India is the Indian philosophies. I think they're really cool to learn about and to even bring back into Melbourne and incorporate them into our own lives, as well as the cultural differences. It's really valuable to learn about different diversity and different cultures and experiences people have across the world. So that's always something really valuable and something we can always include in our own work in Melbourne. Yeah.
Indian philosophy, do you think there'll be takers for it back home? Or I know a lot of people around the world are curious, want to know about spirituality and philosophy and the ancient wisdom of India. Do you think, and I know some of our diaspora there also are into this, will the wider Australian society, do you think, can gain from some of our insights and our civilization?
Yeah, for sure. I think especially going to Rishikesh and doing yoga, we learn about meditation. I think that's something I'll be pursuing in Melbourne, and I think hopefully our other students will too. And it'd be great for other students in Melbourne to learn about Indian ways of life and different cultures and experiences.
Thank you. You are our cultural ambassador, and we are designating you as one. Indian way of life, viewers. It's not just a matter of we here in India feeling proud about it, but the fact is it has some universal utility and value and appeal, and that is part of our soft power. And these Australian students are talking about it. Any last thoughts on your India trip and what you would like to take back? Yes, please.
So my research focuses on political philosophy, and traditionally my research has always been drawing from Western thinkers, but something that I've really taken away from our time here in India is the work of particularly Gandhi and Ambedkar, their thoughts about how to constitute community, Swaraj, Satyagraha as a method of enacting positive change within society. I think is something that many social movements in Australia can really learn from. So for me, taking away those sort of independence era philosophers of the Indian mid-20th century, those are my big takeaways, and I'm going to be looking forward to teaching them to the Monash students back in Australia in the PPE program.
Great. Viewers, our political philosophy also, it's not just the spirituality, the Vedanta and the ancient wisdom, but also the independence and the post-independence era, some of the thought about state and society and citizenship and all these things are indeed unique and need to be brought out to on the world stage in so many different corners of intellectual inquiry, and that's what we are hearing from the Monash group. Any other last comments on your India learnings and how you want to apply it? Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to add on to what my colleague and professor have said about the comparison between Western and Indian culture and philosophy, especially with Rishikesh. I think it was really interesting when we really learned the history and the spiritual significance of yoga and meditation, which in the West is seen as a sort of trendy
just an exercise.
Type of exercise that people do without actually knowing the significance of it. So I think that's really also added to the experience, and it really also provides a perspective onto why these practices are passed down and so significant in Indian culture.
Yeah, thank you. Some of these are universal again in appeal. Yoga has become big in Australia and across the world, and the International Yoga Day, I know our High Commission in Canberra and our consulates, Sydney, Melbourne, they all organize Yoga Day, and it's catching up in a big way, and we are happy to hear. and of course learning about the inner workings and the origins and the the deeper meaning of yoga, that itself also will require greater orientation towards India rather than just looking it as a healthcare workout kind of a thing. But okay, any last comments and thoughts on Oz and India? Where are we going, and what you want to take away from this experience? Yes, please. Yes, please.
We face a lot of issues in Australia where we approach them from a purely Western mindset and perspective. And I think we can solve a lot of issues, or at least start to address them, if we bring in diverse perspectives. For example, we have an increasingly aging population in Australia, and with a very individualistic mindset where we're all atomized units, it's becoming difficult to deal with that issue. And if we learn from the Indian way of living to be more communitarian, to be more family oriented, perhaps that's an issue that we can solve instead of just looking at it from from a purely Western mindset.
Yeah. So viewers, it's so many deep learnings out here, and we are out of time, but I just want to say that this group of outstanding students from Monash University in Australia have really reflected and have really thought through the India experience, and you are hearing it. And of course, they're also learning and reading about India during this trip, and I think that's also adding value to this whole trip that they are here for. And let me say that this friendship is, like we said, the sky is the limit, and it's not only happening at the elite level. You can see young people who are going to be the future leaders are already oriented towards India. And if we make this investment in a big way and continue to draw these connections, it will generate a kind of a long-term dividends over the next coming decades. There is mention about aging society. It could be a mix of immigration, but also looking at the social models in Australia that may benefit from the Indian experience. And at the level of policies, we've already talked about the coordination that we're doing in foreign policy, and also in terms of jointly doing things to shore up the Indo-Pacific. So there's so much to take away. It's not an exaggeration to call the Australia-India strategic partnership the fastest growing one in this region. And the statistics add up, just the trade volumes are going up, the bilateral investment, the military cooperation, and also more of these kind of cultural exchanges are happening, where young people are traveling on both sides and connecting with the communities on both sides. So all of this adds up to a comprehensive strategic partnership, as we call it. And I dare say that the speed at which is going, we may have to add a new prefix to this, the official description of the relationship. With the US, it is comprehensive global strategic partnership. With Australia, maybe we'll have to add something to comprehensive, because it's just getting bigger and bigger. And the world is full of bad news, a lot of conflicts and tensions, but in this region, this friendship is a lot of good news, and is something that we should cherish and admire and support as it rises and continues to flourish to the next level. Thank you, folks. Thank you for being in India. Thank you for being on national TV. And please continue the good work of being friends of India in Australia. I really appreciate your time with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.